Welcome to Tom and Jack Having the Craic, an irreverent look at the week's politics and news. Let's dive in. Is there a big story dominating the news this week?
Big story. I think someone broke up with someone. I can't remember. I think it was something about a divorce or something,
Yeah. Well, I guess metaphorically.
Metaphorically. Well, obviously, look at, I suppose, get straight into it. The big story of the week is the war, really. Yeah. It's... I think it's going to be unbelievable. I think it's going to be mind-blowing what's going to happen.
Really?
Yeah, my prediction for the war is this, and I think the old powers, and I think Britain, America, France, Russia, the old powers that always fought wars, I think they just aren't able to learn that the world has changed, and fighting, the way they fight wars now is ridiculous. Because it's not, if you go back to like Napoleonic times, right? You fight a war, so you're Britain and you fight France, you're evenly matched, you fight a war, and at the end of the war you go, okay, well done, you won, let's have a treaty, let's have a chat, what do you want, right? But wars aren't like that now. Wars are like a big power fights a small power, there's no equality, the small power has no chance of winning, right? But the other side of it too is the small power will never lose and will never accept defeat, because you're not fighting a fair fight and you're not fighting an army versus an army. So I think what will happen is in Ukraine will be exactly what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think the Russian army will beat the Ukrainian army at some point. Yeah. And then you will have, but the people will never accept it, and they'll never stop, and you will just, and you can't, while you can beat an army, you can't beat a people. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, and, at the start of it, it's, rationally thinking, if you think of these things in without emotion, you look at it, and I was kind of thinking, if I was a Ukrainian, I'd just leave. You know what I mean?
There's like 500,000 of them have left, I think.
Well, of course they've left, but I would just, no matter what, I would just left. But then you hear these stories of the 16 guys on the island. Did you hear that story?
No, go on.
So there's 16 Ukrainian soldiers on an island. A Soviet warship pulls up to the island and basically says, surrender.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they told them to go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
And they got killed. You've got 16 martyrs now. So whatever, like, rational thought you might have of, now it's sort of like, they're like Spartans. Yeah. They're like the leaders of the Irish Easter Rising. They're people who are just like, I'm willing to die like that for my country. That'll inspire so many more people to do that.
The leader of the country he's typifying that, isn't he?
Yeah, they're like people flying back, and he's telling everyone to make Molotov cocktails. Yeah. And it's just like, you're just like, whatever I thought it'd start, like, I don't know a lot of Ukrainian people. Yeah. And you don't know how they're going to respond. But it's interesting too, because we're seeing that side of this war, and that's the kind of, there's a romantic side to that. Like the people going back to, like with the Afghan war and the Iraq war, we were never shown that side of the war. But that happened there too, do you know what I mean? So I think we're going to see this war very differently than we've seen previous wars. Yeah. And I think we're going to, people might realise just how ridiculous the Iraq and Afghanistan war was, because in those cases it was Britain and America. And it just, we're going to see why these wars are unwinnable, because like you can defeat an army, you can't defeat 30 million people. There's more. How many people live there?
Oh, I don't know. We can maybe look it up. It's probably around there. But I think you're absolutely right on the not being able to crush a spirit, and I think you're absolutely right about we're being shown that human aspect in a way that we weren't before. My one worry, Volodymyr Zelensky, that's how you pronounce his name, right? The leader of Ukraine. He's a former stand-up comedian. Yeah. He's not doing anything for comedians' egos.
I was thinking of it like, if you had to pick of the famous comedians, who to be your leader of a country when you went to war, like who would you pick? Who would you like?
Well, I think George Carlin would be good. He's like a philosopher king. Yeah, he would have been good. I think Richard Pryor would have been good. Very inspirational.
Richard Pryor, but to be off his head. Like, I don't think I'd follow Richard Pryor to more.
Do you not think he'd be like the Vikings? Like all the Vikings were high on like mushrooms and stuff, and they reckon that's why they were so good at.
Richard Pryor set himself on fire and ran down the street.
Yeah, yeah, that's my point. That galvanized a lot of people in Vietnam.
I think Chris Rock.
Chris Rock?
Chris Rock could
Preacher.
do like Napoleon. He's lying, walking up in front of the guys
Yeah.
at the front, giving them the big speech, getting them pumped up.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Are there any British comedians who'd be good at leading an army? Probably not. I don't think we have that level of ego necessarily in British comedy.
The British comedians aren't as egotistical. I'm trying to think. No, Ricky Gervais, you wouldn't let him lead an army. Becky Flanagan, they're not really serious.
we're going to fight, right? Going at it. Fighting at it.
That actually could work to the British sentiment, you know what I mean? Because the soldiers will be all like, fuck it, we'll have a bit of a laugh, you know what I mean? Mickey, we'll have a bit of crack with Mickey. We go out, you know what I mean? They kind of like to fight in that sort of way. It loosens them up a little bit,
But like a lot of comedians already think they're kind of like,
tribal leaders.
Yeah, already.
Yeah.
And so just the idea that there's a guy out there who's like, no, I can do that.
Was he a good comedian?
You went into politics, I'm going to say no.
That's what I would be thinking too. Like, you wouldn't kind of leave it if...
Because Al Franken did that, didn't he?
The music guy.
No, the senator in Minnesota in America. He was on Saturday Night Live, and now he's like a Democratic senator. And I think that's like a lot of American comics feel that way. If he was really good, he probably wouldn't have left.
Yeah, but did you ever see his comedy? He did parody songs.
Yeah.
They were all right. It was.
Yeah.
He did like things like Nirvana and stuff like that.
That'd be hard to inspire men to fight, I think, as well. Like,
tell you what, though, do you reckon if he goes back to comedy after this, he'll have routines about it?
I think that's what he meant when he said, because he said, like quotes gone everywhere of like, I don't want evacuating, I don't want to riot, I want ammunition.
Yeah.
He's just getting material on Putin. That's all it is.
This, I suppose, this is the situation. Everyone's just going to give them ammunition and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's why it'll go on for so long. I saw that the British Army were over there recently training, doing a bit of training with them.
Do you see they haven't lowered the conscription age, so it's still 41 technically.
To join the army.
Yeah.
But I saw the thing, if you're 18 to 60-year-old men aren't allowed to leave the country.
Really?
I saw that.
Wowee.
Yeah.
But I mean like the British Army. So if we actually, what, in some weird scenario, if we actually went to war,
yeah,
and we actually put boots on the ground, I just don't know why in my head I was like, I won't have to do that.
But 41.
41, apparently, yeah. Are you sneaking in there?
Probably wouldn't have me. They'd probably be.
Well, yeah.
Because I've an interesting family background. I had like on my granny's side, my granny had brothers who fought for the British Army World War One.
Yeah.
But I have IRA people in my family too. So, you know what I mean?
So what you're saying is you're a highly qualified candidate.
Well, like, I wonder if they vetted me. They'd be like, ooh, do you know what I mean? I don't know if we can let him in. Do you know what I mean?
Pros, you can handle a Kalashnikov really well.
I once, when I was in university, I once applied for a job in Gatwick Airport to do a promotion, and I didn't clear security clearance. I had a couple of friends doing like promo stuff during the summer in Gatwick Airport, and I applied for it, and they check you. They sort of, I was basically kind of told I had the job, and then I was sort of told I didn't have a job, and then it was sort of kind of said that they said that they couldn't give it to me because the length of time it takes to get the security clearance would be the end of the summer, and my friends were like, didn't do that with us.
Did they allude to what it might have been?
No. They just said, look, it would take 3 months or 4 months for the process, and by that stage, the summer would be over. So I just took it at face value, but my friends said that didn't happen to them. Like,
yeah. Well, speaking of flying, another hidden impact of the conflict. There's a no-fly zone now around a bunch of Eastern European states.
Right.
So Russia's tried to implement that, which I think is going to wreak havoc with British stag do's. Like if you can't fly to Riga,
back to Newcastle.
It is. you have to downgrade your stag from like £1 a pint back to £3 a pint.
So what has Russia done that?
Yeah, they're trying to implement no-fly zones. Yeah,
but some of those countries are NATO, are they?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the real danger here is, I suppose, the fear of it is that it could escalate into a bigger.
That's the issue, isn't it? If you touch a NATO country, then NATO then has to respond.
Has to respond. Yeah. I said something last week on this podcast about how I think the millennium just kind of awed us into a period of stability, and now that's over. And I think I was right.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was right. I think we just the end of the Cold War. You had a situation where I think America was just so powerful that their power created this stability, and I think that's gone now. And I think we're back to permanent
Just flux.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, did you see Russia accused Britain of cyber attacking them this week?
Yeah, they probably did, though.
Yeah, because they probably did. Well, it was because they were saying there was some misinformation put out on Russian state TV about the escalating nuclear aspects, and they're blaming Liz Truss. Like they
For her for doing it.
yeah, they like named and shamed her specifically.
Yeah.
Which is, I just got this image of this, middle-aged woman, with an old computer.
But listen, I think that, look, everyone's deluded about their own state, and like, I think in Britain, British people think they're a lot nicer than they are, and they certainly think their government is a lot nicer than it is. Like, do you know what I mean? Because, like, some of the stuff that happened in the Troubles in Northern Ireland, that number 10 Downing Street and decisions they were making were unbelievably harsh, like. And I think, everyone just acts as if, it's not one of the most ruthlessly minded states that's ever been.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get an empire.
You don't get to the top for nothing.
Without cracking a few eggs. And by eggs, I mean other human beings.
But I saw Anonymous have declared war on Russia.
Yeah.
That's, I don't know how good they're going to be, but...
Yeah, well, you'd think that's very interesting, because that is, Russia have been arguably the masters, haven't they, of this sort of cyber infiltration, destabilization game over the last decade. Yeah. And for them to get taken out their own game is pretty interesting. Yeah,
it's gonna it's a horrific tragedy, and it's going to be horrible for all the people involved. And I think when we're at such a distance from it, we start to see it we start to forget that, we'll more start thinking about the strategy, kind of seeing it in an abstract way,
almost like a game,
like a game, really, and the game aspect of it all will be very fascinating, but it'll be horrific.
Yeah, I mean, you see some of those images of like the bombs going into like tower blocks and stuff in apartment buildings, and yeah, and it's great to actually see the response. Positive, I guess, is seeing the response from the rest of Europe, and people have been waiving asylum programs.
Yeah, that's actually very impressive. Like, I think Ireland said that you don't have to have a visa if you're coming from the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And, that should have been done with Syria and those other countries. Like, that, I think with the refugee, like, Europe really needs to cop on with the refugee thing. Like, you know what I mean? Because I honestly think, we're democratic countries. I honestly think that most people would take some degree of reduction in liver standards to help people.
Yeah,
we're still we're not all practicing, but I think we're still Christian people
in philosophy rather than faith.
In philosophy, yeah. And I don't think the world wars of Europe are so long ago that we don't get how bad it is to be, cut off.
Yeah.
And I think we all have, we've all watched movies or read books or something where we've kind of felt, obviously, like the Jewish community will always be favouring helping refugees. I think Irish people will be too, because I think that those kind of experiences of feeling like you had to leave and you had nothing, I think a lot of people still kind of feel a bit of that in them, German people, everyone had it. I suppose the Huguenots left France a lot sooner than that, but I think everyone knows that this was in their ancestors.
This is going to be the only podcast this week that references the Huguenots. Just putting that out there. It's not an oft-covered topic.
Well, do you know what? Because I was like, I was going the Jewish community, I was saying the Irish community, and then I'm trying to think who in Britain were like English people, and the Huguenots were the only ones I could think of. They're very much part of the fabric of British society now, but they too were once ran out of a country.
Yeah, that's a fun little Google for everyone at home. Just make yourself a cup of tea, have a little Google of the Huguenots, put your feet up. Enjoy yourself. No, but I think you're right, and it is very impressive to see European nations react in that way and showing what little good can come out of.
Yeah. There's two, like, I always think you should turn every kind of, certainly if you're in politics, I think every tragedy and every crisis you should try and turn to your advantage. That's what I believe. I found 2008 excited me initially and then devastated me afterwards, because I genuinely thought 2008 was the time for the West to sort its capitalism out and climate change out.
Yeah.
Your whole system has collapsed. Now you know the big
You can rebuild.
vested interests, they were on their knees. Like, do you know what I mean? The big CEOs of the banks and everything like that. That was your chance to restructure the system.
Yep.
So that it's not so, brutal and it's not so damaging to the environment. And the fact that we just picked it back up the same.
Yeah.
I just...
Especially because a lot of the things that were really driving that hyper-capitalism are pretty recent phenomena.
Yeah, of
Like,
course.
like things like all, in the US, all companies have to legally maximize profits. That's not that long. That's like a 30-year-old rule. It's not. It's not like
that long.
since the dawn of capitalism that's been in place.
I had an interesting discussion with someone last night at a gig about that rule.
I got him.
And he pulled up a defence I had not seen before, which I was very impressed with. Because the rule is a public company that you cannot make decisions that do not maximise profit, because leaves you vulnerable to be sued by the shareholders.
Yeah.
But what he says is very interesting. If you run a company and you own 50% or more of the shares, then you can make any decision you want, and you can make decisions that are benevolent but not profitable, because you're not going to sue yourself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense.
Yeah, that's the only defence I've ever heard for it. But
And it's a solid one, but I would imagine that's quite a rare scenario
Yeah.
where a company's big enough to be floated, but one entity, one decision-making entity owns 51% of it.
yeah, I think it's more for the smaller kind of corporations. But yeah, so I think, look, what could we do now to take advantage of this situation? One thing is, and I think that now is the time to change our energy supply. Like, so Germany has had to cancel gas orders from Russia.
Yeah.
So now's the time everyone should just go, right, let's go renewable, let's stop with the fossil fuels. And now you have a kind of use that narrative of, we don't want to be in this situation, this vulnerable situation where you can just have it cut off by beholden to someone else. Great time to do that. And then maybe also to sort out this sort of refugee immigrant, like, get over this ridiculous kind of,
especially with like aging populations.
All
Western European countries have aging populations. You absolutely need in every economy 21 to 31-year-old element of your workforce.
Yeah.
If you don't have that coming in through natural, sort of births and stuff, immigration is the only way that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and also it's just it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
How do you feel about nuclear energy on top of the renewables?
Nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is a really tricky one, because in theory I have no issue with it, and I get that it's safe. It's a really tricky one. People are very frightened of it.
They are,
Very frightened. It's a hard sell.
But it's interesting. It is very hard sell, but it's interesting comparing when you're like, they used to blow up, and and obviously there was some horrific accidents, obviously.
Yeah.
But a lot of the technology that was being used in the 80s was developed in the 60s.
Yeah.
So that is a long time ago, and the technology's moved on leaps and bounds in terms of.
And I'd imagine it's something that if we were all doing all the time, we'd get better and better and better and better and better at it. Like, if everyone was using, like, France has lots of energy. Nuclear, is it nearly all nuclear energy?
It's a pretty high percentage. I mean, if it's not 50, it's close.
Yeah.
And like you say, that's sort of under the radar, quietly just gone about doing that. It's not. They don't make a big song and dance about it. They just
do it.
They just do it.
And I imagine you get better and better and better. The whole thing is about the waste, isn't it? But
yeah, but then that's the it's like an opportunity. So an analysis, isn't it, of like what's worse, learning how to process this waste more efficiently and more effectively. By the way, because the technology's got better and better, you use less and less plutonium, which means you have less and less waste. So that's one bad thing you have to deal with. Or the impacts of continuing to use fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Because what we do know now is just renewable by itself wouldn't be enough to maintain the energy consumption.
Yeah, so I guess it becomes a case of like when it was first being branded about nuclear energy, it then seemed more dangerous than fossil fuels, but actually it's now safer than fossil fuels. Like we have to just accept that the fossil fuel way is a road to disaster.
But also, like, as someone who was worked in advertising and PR for a long time, there's a big element as well of like the gas and coal industries.
Oh yeah.
Because at the time, there were huge unions both in the United States and in the UK and Western Europe who had vested interest in saying nuclear's terrible,
dangerous.
Yeah, so it's amazing how the public narrative can be shaped by some obviously very real, horrific things that happened, but then it's like an underlying messaging of just like, it's dangerous, don't touch it.
Yeah, but that happens in everything. I read a thing one time about an anti-smoking drug called Zyban, and that before it went to market, there was stories about detrimental side effects, and Pfizer then basically I think they'd worked out that they'd have to spend 300 million to undo the bad impression.
So
they didn't really push it. And then a couple of decades later, they brought out Champex, which was like a better version of Zyban. And they brought it out at the time when the cigarette companies were getting nailed in the American courts. Yeah. And they just thought they won't pull that trick now because they're under the spotlight.
They used to run some great ads in the US
for smoking.
No, it's like that brand Champex.
Champex,
yeah. It was Ray Liotta from Goodfellas, but he's like 55, 60.
Yeah,
and he looks like absolute shit. So he's like, I take Champex. It's really good for you. You're like, have you done a sit up like in the last decade? He's like, no, I'm great. I'm Champex 101. It's fucking fantastic for you.
Really?
Oh yeah, and they used to get shit up, and they stuck with him as a spokesperson. But they used to get loads of shit online, like, this is the face of your brand.
Yeah.
This horrible looking craggly man doesn't paint a picture like compared to.
Probably look better than most smokers. You know what I mean? I suppose by Hollywood standards, people are looking at it going, oh, who's this guy? But smokers are looking at it going, I'd like to look like that. You know what I mean? If I could look like that.
He doesn't look at stairs with fear.
Yeah. That's an inspirational guy for me there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I suppose he was an icon to the age. That's the other thing they always, with the ads, they like now when you see things like an ad for house insurance and it's He-Men.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, we know who that's at. We know what age group they're going after.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? All the people who like that TV show as children.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think with the narrative building around this, because with the Ukraine-Russia conflict, obviously, the human aspect is one side of it. What do you think it's going to do in any negative aspect in terms of like our feeling towards Russian people? Because that's something it feels like you don't want to miss. There's the Russian government, there's Russian people. They're very separate things.
I don't think so. Because straight away, like Boris has already said, this isn't on Russia. The Russian people have been protesting.
Yeah. Was that tennis player as well, wasn't there, at the weekend?
He did the thing, no war. I think it's very... The media narrative has very much always said that Putin was authoritarian.
Yeah.
I think, after 9/11 and that, like, the newspapers weren't...
No.
They weren't nuanced like
that.
They weren't saying... We weren't being told about the Middle East that there's fringe factions that are extremists and most people are moderate and aren't interested in this.
Yep.
We were never told that.
Yep.
We were always kind of told that everyone in these countries is fanatical.
Yeah.
But we're not being told that narrative about Russia.
No, we've got a lightning rod, which is Putin himself.
Putin himself, yeah.
Yeah. The reason I raised it was because there has been an incident of a sort of civilian on civilian attack over the weekend, which was a Ukrainian chap in Mallorca. He was in like a yacht club. He's a sailor at a yacht club, and his boss was a Russian oligarch.
Right.
And he attempted to sink his boat at the weekend.
Well, look, maybe the oligarchs might get targeted.
That was one thing I was wondering about, because some of them have been quite vocal in Russia about, we don't want this war just for nothing else, and it's bad for business because the sanctions and the gas pipes and stuff. So it'd be interesting to see what side they fall on in the next. Like, do they make a longer term play, which is, Putin's still in charge. At the end of the day, he's still in charge. So we need to back him no matter what. Versus, fucking hell, I'm losing millions.
Well, that's part of the plan with the sanctions.
Yeah.
Part of the plan is to upset them that they might take him out.
Yeah.
Abramovich has changed the ownership of Chelsea. Have you seen that?
Now go on.
I'm not sure I'm getting this right. I think he's basically passed it on to like a foundation or a charity. He's sort of maybe he's just restructured it.
Yeah, that's exactly the word that's coming to my head. Because billionaires never give up money. They just it's like energy to them. It doesn't go anywhere. It just has new owners.
But I do think he's done something that he said he's putting it in a trust or something like that.
And you think he's done that because he's scared of getting targeted, or just because he doesn't want to? He wants to
Well,
step away from the limelight?
there's been talk for anyone associated with Putin to. I think someone had said in the House of Commons to seize the club off him.
Yeah.
So there had been pressure coming that way.
Yeah, it's funny that the Russian government wouldn't listen to Russian oligarchs because the British government listens to Russian oligarchs all the time. If they get angry about zoning bills in Belgravia, our government's like, snap to it.
Yeah, well, they're terrified of Putin. Have you ever seen that footage when he first came to power, where he brought them all in?
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, it's amazing. He brought them all in, and he basically said, "You need to start paying more money to me,
Really?
to the state." And I think it's Boris Brevnicek. There was a guy who challenged him at the meeting. He was in jail for a couple of months.
Yeah, right.
Like.
Because that's the interesting thing about Putin in general is when he first came to power in, was it 2001, 2000, something like that? He was seen as a moderate and a reformer and someone who was more on the sort of Western side of, where the Yalta agreements had tried to go. And he sort of shifted more and more and more into more of a czarist, nationalist perspective.
Yeah.
And the oligarchs, I think, have been like on this journey with him of like, well, can we still make our money though, please? It's not working for us.
It's not. Yeah. It's he's a fascinating guy. Like he's not really. He's from a kind of a quite a humble background too. I think he's from a poor enough background.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose in these situations, like I guess the oligarchs are all fairly unscrupulous too. Like
yeah.
There's
doesn't feel like that's not a debate where there's any winners. Like oligarchs versus Putin.
Yeah.
They don't feel like there's any good guys.
I've started reading a book about the end of communism in Russia and how the oligarchs became the oligarchs.
Right.
And it just seems incredible. So they had all these state-owned companies and they privatized them. So say like the oil company, and they privatized it. And what they did was they gave 30% of all the businesses that they privatized, they gave the citizens of Russia vouchers for shares in those businesses.
Right.
So we would all get, so whatever 30% of the company was, that was divided up by 150 million, and we all got a voucher, and that voucher was worth such amount.
Yeah.
But most people knew nothing about it, particularly. So what ended up happening was, someone would go, entrepreneurial guys would go around their village and they'd gather up, they'd buy them all cheap, put them into bundles, and then they go to a town and sell them, and then the guys in the town would put them into bigger bundles and go to the city and sell them. And there was just this sort of, and then there was auctions, and like there's stories of where, so the general public got 30%. I think the people involved with the companies got a certain percentage, and then a certain percentage I think were put in the open market for sale. And there were stories of, and then there was, you had to show up
Right.
at auctions with your vouchers to claim your percentage.
So basically, people were taking like short-term money. They're like, "Oh, great! I've got like 200 rubles, fantastic!" And they didn't know that in 20 years that was going to end up being worth
A year.
Yeah.
A year,
Oh
yeah.
my
Because
God.
everything was very undervalued.
Right.
Everything was massively undervalued. But there was even things where like companies organised for trains to be cancelled the night before the auction.
So you couldn't get there
So
physically.
people couldn't get there, and I think even someone cancelled a plane, like closed an airport Do you know what I mean? And the book I'm reading is about an American guy who ended up like making a ton of money. He was working for the Boston Consultancy Group, and then he was working for Solomon Brothers, and I think it was while he was working for Solomon Brothers, and he basically he saw what was happening, and he went back to Solomon Brothers and he was like, give me money, I'll make money. And they gave him 25 million, and I think he, in a very short space of time, turned that 25 into 125.
Jesus Christ.
Like in 6 months or a year.
So on the one hand, you think, well, that's a good advert for capitalism because it shows that you can, like, you know, anyone can grow money and it works. And on the other hand, you're like, oh my God, it's a really bad advert for human behavior.
Yeah, and this is what he was saying in the book, that somehow 39%, I think was the figure, of all that privatized wealth ended up in the hands of 20 men, and they're the oligarchs.
Yeah, which is then interesting because you look at the dynamic of our economy, like Britain's economy. I'm sure Ireland's economy is the same, or America's economy. There's some stats similar in America where I think like 10 families own, I think it's like 30% of all America's wealth or something like that.
Is that?
Like the Walmart family, the Koch brothers, and there's like, you know, 3 or 4 more. So it's not a dissimilar stat.
Yeah.
And you've got this, you know.
Well, I suppose that's the 80-20 principle. You know, that wealth just keeps accumulating in smaller and smaller hands unless you set up some kind of interventions.
Yeah, exactly.
That the natural distribution of the universe is unbalanced.
Yeah, because you're trying to gather resources. Like
and the more you have, it's easier to get more. Like, if you have 10 million, it's a lot easier to add another million to that than if you have nothing. And then the other thing that happened then with the oligarchs. So then you had Yeltsin, right? This is after the privatization, and he was running for re-election. This is really good, right? He was running for re-election. His approval rating was 5% or something. People hated him because there was so much poverty and unemployment, and most people's lives were terrible. And there was a guy running against him in a democratic election who wanted to bring back communism. He was the Communist Party's candidate, and he was killing it in the elections. So then the oligarchs made a deal, Yeltsin made a deal with the oligarchs that they would put all their money and all their power and influence behind him. But in exchange, if he got re-elected, he'd have to offload more companies to them, privatize more companies and sell them to them very undervalued. And at the same time, America was like very much over helping Yeltsin's campaign. Like, you know, this wasn't Putin paying for a few Facebook ads to help Trump.
Yeah.
This was like members of the Clinton administration in an office in Moscow, you know, this is what you should do. You know, like completely teaching them how to win a democratic election. You know, it's complete interference.
Yeah, which is, I think you're absolutely right. It's so tempting for Western countries to be like, no, we're the good guys, and the nefarious stuff happens over there. But America did that for like 30 years.
Doing it everywhere,
Yeah, like South America is basically set up by the CIA to advantage American business, like United Fruit and textile companies. So
all these kind of things, when it is very interesting, because all these kind of things, when you do them, when you believe you're the good guys, like, you know, I think like what's happening in Ukraine is very similar to what happened. It's an illegal war by a big power, but the way we are being told about it, is just completely different. The other thing I found funny was this week, I was talking to 1 or 2 people at work, and they were like, you saw that the war had started, and you know, I don't want to judge a book by its cover, but I started wondering, some of these people think if you had asked them 2 weeks ago, was there any war going on in the world at the moment, they'd have been like, no.
I think about that all the time. I agree completely. I think about that all the time, that you only ever care about the things you're being shown in a very casual way.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure at any given time there's
there's always, I don't think...
dozens maybe of wars going on, hundreds maybe.
I think I remember there was a day where they said that there was a day like where they said, I think it was the first time ever in history that there wasn't a war being fought. There was a couple of peace treaties going on. There was a couple of ceasefires going on, but like it's continued. There's never not been war It's completely continuous.
Yeah, exactly. It's a constant battle for resources wherever you are around the world. Yeah, it doesn't go away. And I was thinking the same thing around the number of people who actually point to Ukraine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because it's amazing how quickly people start having opinions and getting very on their high horse and getting very like, I'm all for hearing people's opinions and listening to what they think about the situation, but like the morality and the righteousness with which people sometimes attack.
Yeah,
you're thinking like, how much do you actually know about this topic? Before
But the media does tell you how to think. It does give you your opinions, and you see this a lot with sport. I used to watch a lot of sport when I was younger, like, and you'd watch a game of football. And the pundits would talk about it afterwards. Then you go into school the next day, you talk about the game. There would always be someone who would parrot exactly what someone said. Wasn't it? There was always someone, they just pass it off like it's their own opinion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And everyone was just like, yeah, it's an interesting point. Like, everyone like, that's what the guy said yesterday.
Yeah.
Like.
I always thought Match of the Day, that was the easiest job in television. Because if you ever watched like the Alan Shearer analysis of a game, it's always just like, so he's just sort of gone down the lane there and he's crossed it and then he scored. I mean, Mam could do that. You shiny-headed moron.
He's just describing what happened.
He's just like, what? He's like a 2-year-old watching telly.
Yeah.
He sat a 2-year-old down and like, tell me what's happening on that screen.
I'll tell you who, Mark Lawrenson. How the hell did he stay on telly for so long?
Captain Charisma.
He was so miserable.
He was like
It was like he hated being there.
It's like he hated being there, hated the sport, hated the idea of the sport being played.
Hated the people he had to talk to.
Yeah.
Oh, well, another terrible game today. Oh, God, I can't believe you flew me all the way to Istanbul, first class, put me up in a 5-star hotel, and I have to sit beside you and talk about football for thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
Horrific.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
What are you complaining about? Like, also, I'd love to know, what would he rather have been doing?
Oh, jeez. I
Do you think he had a garden back somewhere that he was like, I wish I was back on my
I
breakfast?
watched that and I used to think his agent must be unbelievable. They must have the BBC over a barrel of a gun. Like, do you know what I mean? There must be no way they can get rid of this guy. Like,
Yeah.
because no enthusiasm.
Yeah. Because you think, well, I only wondered if, we were saying earlier about demographics, like certain people of a certain age just love someone. I always wondered, like, because he was big at Liverpool, wasn't he?
He was big at Liverpool when they were,
So I was always wondering, like, is the average age of Match of the Day viewers like 50? And Mark Lawrence is just like a good fit for them. Also, because they're as miserable as him.
Yeah, but that, I think that's more the case. Obviously, that Alan Hansen too is Liverpool. But maybe that's the case that, angry, bitter people appeal to angry, bitter people. Do you know what I mean? And if they were all just happy and shiny, you'd lose the angry people. They go looking for someone else to watch.
Well, I think that is so true. That's how Fox News works in America. You want a 55-year-old to 60-year-old white guy being angry or scared.
Yeah.
Talking to someone at home who's a 55-year-old, 65-year-old white guy who's angry and scared. I think that works.
Yeah, well, it's emotion, is it? I suppose that's...
It's mirroring. It's this thing where... if you elicit an emotion and someone's watching you, it's like they get like 30%, 25% or something of your emotion that you're feeling just by watching you.
Why do you think younger people aren't as angry as older people?
Do you think that's always been true?
Yeah, but I feel like when I was younger, you always regularly saw men get really angry.
Yeah, a lot more fighting.
But I just don't feel you see it as much now.
No, I think you mentioned something on the last pod, which I think is true, which is there's a bit more, I think when you have a bit more hopelessness about your situation in life, it's almost easier to not be angry. You're just like, fuck it. Like, if the Gen Z are like, I'm never going to buy a house, I'm never going to have a good job, climate change is going to kill us all in 10 years anyway, like, let's just do some shrooms, chill out. Like, there's no point in getting angry.
That that the world has become so complicated and confusing.
Yeah.
That people feel they have less influence, so they don't get frustrated when they're.
Oh yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Because if I think back to the fights I avoided like the plague growing up in Leeds, what you got angry about was the things you could control. Like, I want to go home. Like, guys be fighting over who goes home with the girl, or guys be fighting about like who got in the queue at the club or whatever. It was always like very small scale things about life that felt within the realm of this fight could actually sort this out. And that's where all that rage and anger came from. Whereas I feel like now people are just like, I'm connected to the whole world all the time. It's too big. It's too complex. How the fuck am I going to... What is my place in this world? What's the point in getting angry?
Or maybe there's been a big change of philosophy. And I think this could be the Putin kind of thing, because he, up until World War II, the idea that if you're more powerful than your neighbour, you can bully them.
Yeah.
You know, countries could do that. And maybe, you know, that like filtered down everywhere. So if I'm the biggest guy in the town, I should be allowed to bully whoever I want. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that actually we moved away from that, and then it was you know, because the global thing was all like, no, you can't pick on people. You have to let everybody.
Influence was more important than power, and you can be very influential without necessarily being powerful.
Yeah,
and that probably extrapolates to regular life as well.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
it's like, he might be a scrawny little guy, but like he's the coolest guy in here. He's a DJ or whatever. Or he's, you know, all the girls like him for a different reason, and me being big and physical doesn't help me get one over on him.
Get one over.
And similarly in global politics, there can be with, you know, the internet and with the way information is disseminated, you can be a very influential player on the world stage without
being physically strong.
Yeah.
But China and Russia want to bring it back to, if you're the biggest boy in town,
yeah,
you should be allowed to do what you want.
Yeah. Do you believe Putin? Just on that exact point, do you believe Putin when he said, he gave a quote the other day saying he wasn't prepared for the sanctions to be as hard as they've been, and he wasn't prepared for...
Did he say that?
Well, this is what I'm wondering if he said it or if it's come out, because it came out as like a statement from the Russian government. But I wonder if it's like a 3D chess move where he's trying to garner sympathy or something, or trying to get elements of the international community to feel sorry for him, or garner sympathy at home. Because the other thing he said was he's been shocked by the lack of preparedness of the Russian army.
Really?
Yeah.
How does he not know how prepared they are?
Well, exactly. How does he? Exactly. And it reminded me of, you know, that meme that goes around all the time of Downfall, like Hitler in his bunker, like, we'll just circle around and do this. I was wondering, either is this like some sophisticated 3D chess move that none of us are privy to, like what he's actually doing, or B, is he just a bit of a crazy motherfucker?
Well, he could be just so surrounded by people who are afraid of him and people who want to please him that he's like, I think we'll invade Ukraine. How's the army looking? Brilliant. Tip top. Because you remember, like in China, they had that thing. You know, with those famines in China, the chairman Mao didn't even know about. No, everyone was afraid to tell him what was actually happening. So maybe they've been telling him, army's fine. And do you think there'd be any blowback from the West or anything? That's all. Not at all.
Just that I've been seeing a lot of wooden guns out there. Is that part of it? Is that part of the training?
So they haven't succeeded in any of their ambitions yet, the military targets yet.
Yeah, it doesn't say. I mean, I think what you said right at the top of the show, that, you know, they're fighting a mindset. They're fighting a spirit, a willingness to defend your own country.
Yeah.
So I think so far, I think mainly what they've been doing is just shelling into Kiev, which looks like a show of force and looks impressive, but it's not. You're not putting.
You're not making.
You're not gaining any ground, and you're not putting any of your troops at risk, really.
Yeah.
Which again makes me wonder: is this just a crazy global posturing move? Ultimately, they just want Russia to feel like a big boy on the world stage again, and he'll do this for a while until either. I mean, is his goal that Europe gets so sick of not having Russia's gas that they have to do something about striking a deal with him? Or,
well, I suppose his grievance is, this is what they say, that he embodies this kind of victimization. Russia always feels hard done by Europe and the West. Didn't get the respect they deserved for their efforts in World War II. Mm-hmm. Where after the end of the Cold War, when the Berlin Wall fell, they said that they were happy for East Germany to become part of the EU, but they didn't want any other states, Eastern ex-Soviet states, to become part of NATO. They didn't want NATO expanding eastwards. NATO expanded very much eastwards. Mm-hmm. So I suppose it's a bit like Hitler too, isn't it? Because it's that this is a proud nation that's been humiliated.
Yeah.
And needs to stand up for itself and needs to reassert itself to regain some pride.
Yeah,
in the face of humiliation.
And I think that was my first thought as well. But you're like, oh, do you want to think about Hitler? Because it's a comparison everyone wants to make. But I think what's interesting for him is they never shut down the internet the way, say, like China regulates the internet. Russia's access to information is a lot more open, and I wonder if the people in Russia would buy that argument as readily as people in Germany in 1938 would have.
I'd imagine some would. I'd imagine, the nationalism exists everywhere. I think, like there was people in Russia who would have remembered when Russia was the second most powerful country in the world. There was a time when Russia says X, you jump, you do it,
Yeah.
And then to have that where, America is just basically every step of the way said we won't do that, and then did do that, and you are kind of being humiliated. It's an interesting one too. Do you watch that Mindhunter?
Yeah,
the serial killers. It's in that too that they say that one of the things with serial killers is they get humiliated as children. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Usually by their mother.
Yeah.
So humiliating people causes a lot of trouble, doesn't it?
You take anything away from this week's episode.
I'm going to write a book. How to stop humiliating people, like, you know what I mean? How to avoid planting the bad seed in the first place. Like.
But it's true, if you put your foot on people long enough, eventually they have, that's kind of what I was thinking with his whole nuclear thing. He put the nuclear on.
Yeah, that's...
Because you wonder, exactly on that point about how you deal with humiliation and where you store that in yourself. If it's a choice for him between firing off a nuke, I'm not saying we're there yet, obviously, but if it's a choice for him between being backed off and being told, like, get back in your corner.
Or firing the nuke.
Or firing a nuke.
Yeah. Well, this is in the art of war. You should never corner a weak enemy. It's that whole idea that a cornered rat is as strong as a fox. This sort of thing, like that. It's in the art of war. You should always
give them an out.
Yeah. Never corner them.
Yeah. Because it feels a bit like with the pylon. I think and this is part of culture more broadly. With the pylon of like just slamming them and saying, I don't think the West is giving them a way out currently.
It doesn't look like it. Yeah, and I suppose this is the other side of it too, because you have, so there's his rationale, right? Russia's humiliated, this is a restoring pride. But this is where he looks like he's gone irrational, is you can't see it succeeding.
No.
That's where so the why he wants to do it, there's an element of rationality, but how he believes
it'll play out.
Yeah, how he believes it plays out. That's where he's become a bit
irrational.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing I was wondering was, is it enough for him if he just destabilizes Ukraine? He goes back to his corner, but he seeds enough doubt in Ukrainian people that, this government costs our country a lot of lives. And it's like a longer term play for him just to destabilize Ukraine and get a more Moscow sympathetic leader in there eventually.
Yeah. Oh well, that's another thing they say, that they want they don't want Ukraine to be moving towards liberal democracy, so they want it to stay more like a Soviet state. Yeah,
and you wonder if like the longer term players, this is the price you pay if you move towards them. This is the price you pay. So therefore, you want a more Moscow pro candidate in there, because then we won't have to deal with this again. Yeah.
But it probably made Ukrainian people more anti-Russian than they've ever been.
I mean, you would think, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But then you don't know if you push how far you push those people. You push those people, the first 3 months, let's say, it's split spirit and we're all in this together, and then eventually, if the toll gets too high, do people's attitudes start to change? Maybe they don't, but maybe they do.
Look at again. It's very similar with Iraq. The West went in thinking we'll go in there and this country will become more Western, and it probably became less Western by the end of it, because you just create so much hatred and resentment towards you. There's a great podcast about the Iraq War called Blowback, and the Americans honestly thought they were going to create a free market utopia in Iraq.
Yeah.
Like, a real libertarian paradise. And that was incredibly naive.
Yeah.
You know, and I suppose that's that, you know, so what he's going in hoping to do to kind of to stir Ukraine up and to make it a bit more Soviet, he's going to push them away. But I guess the difficulty then does become for the West, because Ukraine's like, okay, we want to join, afterwards say we want to join EU, NATO, like.
Because then does the EU want them to join NATO? Because if you ever did it again, that's like the whole NATO alliance has to fight.
Yeah, it's and
then you are on for a big Barney. That is a real thing.
Okay, you're in NATO. You're representing the British delegation.
Yeah,
I'm representing the Irish delegation.
Yeah.
Would you let Ukraine in NATO and the EU?
I think I would have to say yes, because I am single, and that would be a good opportunity to meet the future Mrs. Henry, I think.
I think at this moment in time, I think to publicly say no in a hypothetical conversation would make you, as an individual, look like a very bad and ungenerous person,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
someone who's going against the zeitgeist. But on the flip side, I think if I was the leader of Ireland, I think it would be irresponsible to the Irish people to do it, because you're putting yourself in danger.
Round of applause. Round of applause.
Thank you.
Round of applause. I think it's basically like...
That's my political
That's
speech.
it. He's done. He can vote.
Landslide victory.
We're going to put the voting link on the Instagram. You'll be able to vote for him. I think in reality, though, if Ireland and Britain were at those talks, we'd just be like, just wait to see what Joe says. Whatever Joe says.
Yeah, whatever Joe says, we go with it. Joe, what do you think, Joe? Well, Joe, the thing with America, it's an absolute, like, they're not getting involved, you know.
Yeah.
But they'll funnel money in, but
Yeah.
they're not going to.
No, because that could be the...
Well, this is the other thing I think is interesting with the Putin thing, is it puts America in an interesting position with Trump lurking in the background.
Because his big thing is going to be, I would have taken them on. I would have gone in there straight away.
But no matter what Joe does, Trump will come to, like, I don't think they will, right?
Yeah.
But if America had gone in and fought, Trump would straight away be gone, America first, we're wasting money, you know.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely.
But also, he's probably now, if they don't do anything, he's probably now, well, he's already said, it wouldn't have happened when I was there, he was afraid of me, you know, so that's playing... you know, that's creating a thing. So it'll be interesting how it affects other countries, because obviously France now, I think it's tilting the election back towards Macron in France. Is it? Yeah. So those kind of unforeseen consequences are interesting, because it seems to be tilting the French away from the anti-EU.
Yeah.
Let's go it alone. People, because
it makes people be like, oh god, there's some real shit happening. We might need a more structured defense.
And I suppose it's just there does seem to be a collective coming together. Like,
also, if the Russian army is a bit like, oh, how good's our army? The French is like, do we have an army?
France is a good army. I always think, do you know what?
Do they though?
No, I find this. Like, as an outsider in Britain, one of the things I find, there's a big blind spot in Britain to France, because during the Brexit referendum, the thing I just find absolutely mind-boggling is how often this kind of people go on about Germany using the EU to try to take over.
Yeah.
It's like, if France is who's trying to take over Europe, it's always France. France have taken over Europe before. They've done it. They know how to do it. They've successfully done it. They've got a big army. Like, no one ever says that France are using the EU to take over Europe. France are far more likely to have that mindset than the Germans.
It is so funny. You are so right. It is so funny how Britain's conception of itself is built on vestiges of empire and World War II.
Yeah. Completely World War II. Like, like, it's almost like nothing else ever happened.
100% in the whole of history.
The whole of history.
It's like we won this big war.
So history is like 99% World War II, 1% everything else.
Henry VIII is the other 1%.
Henry VIII is the other 1%.
Yeah.
And it's, and people like France's army, I think, is almost completely comparable to the British army.
Right.
In like, France might have a few more tanks than Britain. Britain might have a few more planes. But like pretty much they're very, very evenly matched.
Yeah.
France's huge global influence. France has a very aristocratic mindset. It has no, like Britain, no insecurity about ruling a continent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Do you want to rule a continent? Yeah, we're like Germans are, other than kind of, like the Germans were never really that type of people, like, we should be in charge of everything. Hitler was, it's kind of more Austria. The Austrian-Hungarian Empire, like it's more an Austrian sort of mindset than a German. German people are kind of always a bit more, like it was never always this big, powerful country. And they're not really that mindset. But Britain always talks about them like they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's just linked back to that one
thing.
I mean, it's a pretty big conflict.
Big conflict, yeah.
So,
and around the world, like the French army is respected around the world. Like, there's countries that are like, you don't fuck with France.
Really?
Oh yeah, Jesus Christ.
Well, I suppose like they still have very real links to their empire.
Yeah,
like going on around the world.
In the mid, they were well respected in the
North
Middle East.
Africa. Yeah.
Well, I was telling you that thing where the Saudi Arabians had them over. Their special services guys over training their for the siege of Mecca. Yeah, and then in Asia too, France is a well-respected country.
I to be honest, mate, I can't get over the image in my head of the Russian army pulling up to the borders of Kiev, and the guy just goes fire, and the tank just goes like.
And it's
like, Steve, did you not?
Do you think did that happen?
I in my head, I would just to try and.
I heard they had good equipment though.
Yeah, I mean, in all reality, they probably do. But I just like this idea that the Russian army, no one's, like you said earlier, no one's bothered to like actually check.
To check it.
Or test.
Well, another one for you of how Russia felt hard done by. So, World War II, they didn't feel they got the respect they deserved for the fight they put up.
Huge sacrifices made.
Huge sacrifice, right? Napoleon, right? Everyone knows that Napoleon lost in Waterloo, right? But he had two big defeats in Russia before Waterloo that took the wind out of his sail.
Yeah.
But no one, everyone, who brought down Napoleon? The Duke of Wellington in Waterloo. So there's another example where they feel like they were overlooked. So they do get overlooked a lot.
Yeah, which is strange because they've got, I was about to say they need to get better storytellers, but like Russians are brilliant at telling stories about their own hardship.
Yeah.
Like if you ever, obviously like War and Peace and like The Gambler and like some great stories about Russian hardship, but they've never done a good job, I don't think, of fictionalizing their history.
Well, do you know what their problem is? Their leaders are always small.
Go on.
That's
just physically small.
Just physically small, yeah. And I think that's, you see, in a democracy, the group has kind of a sense to pick someone who has a bit of presence, because like Putin's small.
Yeah,
I think I've seen a picture with him, David Cameron, Barack Obama, and like they were towering over him. Stalin was small.
Yeah,
like you see it. What was it? Eisenhower and Churchill. They were big guys, and there was when you're negotiating a treaty in a small room. Now the French guys are always kind of small too, but they're energetic.
Yeah. Nippy. Yeah. Just more of a nippy world leader.
The power dress, you know what I mean? They're not.
That's what I was going to say. More stylish.
More stylish,
Yeah.
The British and Anglo guys are big. They're tall guys. Yeah. They're like, how you doing? The German guy or the Russian guys play it humble, and the French guys all over the fucking shop.
And come with some va-va-voom.
Yeah, exactly. So you're saying about the army. Have you ever read this thing? It's they use it in business school a lot, but it's prior to World War II. Some guy was told to assess the German army's readiness for war.
Right.
And he wrote a report. And an element of the report has become really famous and is used in large organisations and businesses ever since. And it's brilliant. He said that there was 4 types of people in the German army. He said you had the unintelligent, lazy. Right? Have you heard this?
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
It's really good.
You have the unintelligent, lazy. He said these people do no harm. They're great, keep them. Then you have the intelligent lazy. These people are suited to the highest office, right? These people should be at the top. And then you have the intelligent, hard-working. These people are your officers. These are your main guys. They run everything. And then you have the hard-working, unintelligent. These people are a menace.
Yeah.
And they need to be all fired.
Yeah.
That all they do is create loads of extra work for everything. And I think we've all worked with someone who is just like, calm down with all this extra work you're creating that's pointless.
Yeah, and pointless, or pointing in a horrific direction that nobody asked for.
Yeah.
And they'll just like plow on because like I've got to be doing something. I've got to be busy doing something. It's like but you're pointing the boat towards the iceberg. You don't need to.
I think you know what? I think we've had a decade of hard-working, unintelligent people being too prominent.
I couldn't agree more. Do you know what I think it is? There's a fascination with work being morally good, like hard work being morally good. Because I think about someone like Churchill. Obviously, you're getting up early, and I'm not saying he's a perfect guy by any stretch. Obviously, there's a lot of but he was a gin-soaked, truffle-eating, cigar-munching guy.
Painter, and he still had time to do a bit of painting.
Yeah. So and he would get up late. Because you hear about modern leadership, and it's like, I get up at 4 a.m. and I'm working till 3 and da-da-da. And he was like, some days wouldn't get out of bed till like 10, 11 and just come in and make decisions. And you think that he might fall into that intelligent, lazy category some other time.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is as celebrated anymore as it used to be, just being a great thinker.
You do know who the Prime Minister of Britain is, I don't Jesus Christ. Like he's complete. Well, he gives the impression of hard work, but he's lazy. Yeah. He's definitely everything about his demeanour.
Do you know what? Actually, that's a great pushback. Because the minute you said that, I was thinking like Trump's kind of like that as well.
Trump is lazy as well. Trump is completely lazy. Like
but then and they're not stupid people. But
no, they're smart. They're smart.
But I guess they don't have that level of like Enlightenment style intellect that you would associate with someone who could just think for a little while. They didn't have to work that hard, but just like think for a little while.
I hate the virtue of hard work. I hate it, and it's not like hard work is not virtuous. Like it's a complete and utter con, right? There's a great book called Why We Sleep, right, about a Harvard professor who's studying sleep patterns and all that. And he says, look, you need to sleep 8 to 9 hours a night. If you don't sleep 8 to 9 hours a night, you will have health problems. Yeah. Like, that's it. Like, there's a biological fact. And he said there's so much mythology about not sleeping and the virtues of not sleeping to work hard. And he said a lot of it came from, in America, where the big factory owners... They wanted the factories running 24 hours a day, but they also had massive shareholding in the media, in the newspapers. So they started writing about the virtues of not sleeping and saying, "Oh, you only need 4 hours a night," and
Yeah.
And Margaret Thatcher was famous for the
4 hours a night.
4 hours a night, but she got dementia.
Right.
At the end, like some of the guys in cabinet said, but by the end of it, like her memory was gone. Like,
yeah.
So it's not, and then also like just the whole idea that people can compensate for lack of talent by hard work. It's just like fuck off.
It's a big Victorian thing as well, wasn't it? Like the devil makes work for idle hands.
Yeah, they're always trying to. It's a con.
Yeah, it is.
You always have to know who's winning by this.
Yeah, well,
it's like the women can multitask.
Yeah,
like this idea that you say to them, women are told that they can multitask and men can't. Like, and then it make you feel good about this, but you're being tricked.
Yeah,
you're being tricked into doing extra work.
Yeah. Extra work for less. Yeah, absolutely. I think it just comes from control. In both instances, it comes from control.
Yeah.
That if I can make you think that idleness is somehow immoral, you'll be doing what I want you to do more of the time and less of what you want to do.
Yeah.
More of the time.
And then Malcolm Gladwell brought it along with the 10,000 hours, and the internet sped it up a bit. I had young people coming into me in the pharmacy like with health issues, and they're coming in and they got like skin thing or this, that, and the other. And I first question I always ask anyone who comes in is like, how many hours a night you sleep? And when they start telling me 4 or 6, and I was like, what? And it's because they've completely convinced themselves that the number one factor to success is hard work. It's not.
No, I mean, so I didn't realise this, but when I was last full-time job, your Gmail notifications and all your WhatsApp groups from work.
Yeah.
Basically, every time one of them comes through, it triggers a mini fight or flight response.
Does it?
Yeah, so you neurologically, your body's going through the same thing of like, a tiger, because you're like, what is this? Is it bad news?
Yeah.
And it's producing all these stress chemicals and stuff and
cortisol.
Yeah. So if you're checking emails at 10 p.m., you're basically giving yourself like stress hormones, like right late into the night. So I stopped getting my notifications on my phone. I got fired pretty shortly afterwards. But
you got
I got like
that in France they have a law that says but I heard in practice it's happening but they had that law that you weren't allowed. We need to fight back. The lazy people need to
fight back.
Look, if 3 things come from this war, a shift away from fossil fuels, an openness to refugees,
absolutely,
and a pushback against the virtues of hard work, and a awakening to the beauty of laziness.
100%. What do we want? Laziness. When do we want it? Sometime soon.
Yeah, I want you to go to work. Don't and this is the other thing too, like with the pandemic, it was quite interesting because I work in health in the pandemic. If you were operating prior to the pandemic at 100%, you're fucked.
Right.
You needed to have that bit of slack because suddenly you had a massive jump in workload. So if you were going flat out, so you should never be going at 100%.
No, and who says the idea watching my brothers operate like that a little bit, where like it's 100%. And my brother had a really good quote, which was during the pandemic he wasn't working from home; he was sleeping in the office. And he's just like, it's a level of stress I'm not sure humans are meant to.
No, definitely not.
Under.
No. And do you know what it is? So it's the internet, right? So what we say that the hard-working, unintelligent. So there's a thing in psychology that the child who speaks the most in class is often perceived as the smartest child, regardless of what they say. So if you were the hard-working, unintelligent person on the internet, what you did was you just uploaded the most amount of content possibly, and you, by your ubiquitous appearance, you tricked people into thinking you're intelligent.
Check clips every day, by the way.
Check the clips every day. So you tricked. So there's quite a few. Like if you look on the internet, there is quite a few people who are now classed as intellectuals that historically wouldn't have had would never be classed as intellectuals. So thought leaders rather than intellectuals.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, because it should take a long time to come up with a novel idea or an interesting idea or something that's really saying something about humanity. Should take a while. Shouldn't be something that can be uploaded on a daily basis.
On a daily basis, yeah. And if you're talking on the internet all day, then you're not reading, are you?
No.
And there's an old saying that never trust anyone who talks more than they read.
Yeah. Empty vessels make the most noise.
Empty vessels make the most noise. So we'll have to get rid of the internet, I think.
4 things. That's 4 things that have come out this week. We're gonna be lazier. We're gonna have no internet. We're not gonna have fossil fuels. And I don't know.
I really want to start a workers' rebellion. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like have a statue after I died. Just kind of like I suppose a moderate rebellion. Like let's all let's all just start doing the bare minimum.
I think that is a great revolution. That should happen.
Everyone just start doing
bare minimum.
Bare minimum.
I think the biggest advice I would give anyone starting a job is you will never be rewarded.
Go on the extra. Never get rewarded for going the extra mile.
And like I was definitely one of those people. I was like I've like slept in the office before presentations.
Really?
Oh mate, like not a little bit, like a fair amount.
Yeah.
Like, and you never ever get the reward that is worth the missing birthday parties, missing friends.
No.
You know,
no.
like, you'll never get that back ever. And when you're 40, you're not going to look back and be like, sure, I'm glad I did that pitch that didn't work out.
Well, like we said, you know, the lazy, intelligent make the best officers. They make it to the top. So if you're sleeping in the office before the thing, they're just looking, well, he's nothing like me. I'm not gonna promote him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I think I was definitely like I'm a lazy, intelligent at heart, but I felt I was in an environment where
That was intolerable.
intolerable.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the people above you were like, no, I don't need that out of you. I need you to be grinding away.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
I actually probably shouldn't say it, like, but I changed the job because they were trying to get me to do something.
Porn.
No, they were trying to get me to do something outside work, and I played a move. Basically, I was expected to go to training outside my normal working hours, which I have no contractual obligation to do.
Yeah.
And all I was trying to do a bit of bargaining. So I was basically trying to have a conversation where I was kind of going to say, now I don't have to do that, but I will do that for you, but I'm kind of looking for this.
Yeah.
And what I was looking for it wouldn't have been a big give to
Right.
give away. But the conversation quickly blew up, right? In that before I got to finish my pitch, I was just basically told in quite an aggressive, patronizing way that I didn't have a choice, that I had to go and do this thing. And I intended to go. I was going to go, but I was going to try and get credit for it and bargain for it. So the minute he said that to me, I just said, I don't. And he's like, you do? And I was like, no, I don't. I said, I've contracted home. I said, and it clearly states in the contract, training has to be attended if provided during normal working hours. So
Yeah.
it's absolutely, I was on the right side, right?
Yeah.
Legally, I was on the right side. Culturally, within the profession I was in, I was on the wrong side. So they kept coming at me, and then, and then I just said, I said, do you know what? I came back and I said, in principle, you're right. I will go, but I can't go that weekend. I just happen to have something on, which I actually did. Which anyway.
Well, I think there's...
I left that job after that because
Yeah.
I felt that it was a black mark against me for standing up for myself.
For nothing objective. That if you said it to a friend who didn't work in your industry, they'd be like, no, you're right.
Completely right.
It's only like the bylaws and the weird sort of subjectivity within any given industry that makes people do things
Now,
like that.
the worst part of the whole thing was, the absolute worst part of the whole thing was, a couple of years later, I was having a conversation with someone who works for kind of like a representative body for the profession.
Right.
And I mentioned it. And she said to me, you should have gone to that training. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, who are you? Like, is no one on our side?
No.
Like,
No, I think...
could have, the representative body should be like, no, anyway.
They should have given you some time in lieu.
Yeah,
They should
now
have given you
afterwards, like, it doesn't happen that often. Like, now my position will be, I just go, like, do you know what I mean? I'm not gonna get upset about it. And to be completely honest with you, I never had an issue of going to them. It was just because I went to use this bargaining thing, and then for someone to come at me in an aggressive way, I was just like, you know.
I was always the same. I would get into trouble every single job I had over things like that.
Yeah.
They're like, it's a matter of it's a principle. You're not giving me a very good argument. You're not giving me a rational response to the question. And then, like, you know, little kid bit of me turns on. It's like, that's not fair. You can't do that.
And the other side of it too is, this is my other kind of thing about it is too, like, if they're going to speak to me like that, I'm not going anywhere with them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not. You don't speak to someone like
I'm
that.
a person before I'm an employee.
Yeah. You don't, like, if you value someone and you see them in a respectful way and you think, okay, this person has a future within this kind of organization, you're not going to talk to them like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're done there anyway. You're not going to.
Yeah. There's one final news story. I think we can. Well, I want to decide if this guy is lazy, intelligent, or hardworking, unintelligent. There's a guy in Florida,
Yeah.
right, who was arrested after stealing a crossbow
Right.
that he stuffed down his pants,
Jesus.
made it out of the store, didn't get arrested for stealing the crossbow, got arrested days later on a burglary charge, and he happened to have the crossbow
With him.
on him.
Right.
And I can't decide if, well, A, how much confidence you have to have just to stuff a crossbow down your pants, think no one's going to notice.
Right. Well, he got away with it, but anyway, gone.
Yeah. And secondarily, what kind of home, is this like for home defense, this crossbow? When we...
Well, no, it was for the armed robbery, wasn't it?
So, well, who's he robbing? Like the Vikings? Like, what's he expecting to happen?
The crossbows in it. Do you know what? I'm going to give this guy a bit of credit here.
Go on.
Because, like, a crossbow is fierce enough to go in to rob somewhere.
Yeah.
That the person there, like, if someone came in and pointed a crossbow at me,
He's fucking crazy.
I will give them
Yeah.
the money, right?
If he's crazy enough to go out and buy a crossbow.
I will give them the money. But on the same side, every armed robber wants to go in and gets the money and does not want to kill someone, right? That's they say what the armed robber wants. But also with the crossbow, you're less likely to actually, if it goes wrong, you're actually less likely to kill someone.
True.
So it's the perfect armed robbery weapon.
So this guy's clearly intelligent.
This guy's a genius. He has figured out the perfect weapon. How did the armed robbery go?
So he didn't get to the armed robbery. Apparently he was there ready to do it. Someone called in the parking lot because they saw him trying to load up a crossbow.
So the downside of the crossbow is
Low.
the size. But do they come small now, or
Your modern crossbows.
can you get them? Can you get
Well,
them?
it must have been pretty small because he got it down his pants.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess it can't be.
They're a lot smaller than they used to be.
Yeah, more,
Yeah.
They've come a long way since 1200. So I think you're right. I think we have to give him credit for a very novel approach to armed robbery that probably would have gone well.
So what's he going to be convicted to, because he hasn't done the armed robbery, so he can obviously.
So he's been charged. He's ended up being charged with like murder with weapons charges.
Weapons
So like
charges,
because
okay.
he didn't buy the crossbow, he hasn't got a permit for it.
So he's going to go to jail now, and he's going to be in the recreational room, and he's going to be like, "Listen, lads, crossbow. It does enough to frighten the person, less likely to kill people. Everyone's going to come out of that prison going, crossbow. You know what I mean? There'll be some guy there. I killed a guy in a bank, and I didn't mean to, and then like I'm here for life, and everyone will be like, crossbow.
I'll give you a hack. Give you a robbery hack.
Give you a robbery hack.
Maybe they'll send this guy into the front lines in Ukraine. Maybe if Putin's army isn't as well prepared as everyone thinks,
Send him with the crossbow.
send him in with a crossbow.
And where's that? Florida.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So it's always Florida, but yeah,
Florida's crazy, is it? Yeah.
it's mental. Like I would go down. I went down there a few times when I was working over there. It's wild. It's at the top, especially. There's like you go to certain like hotels or bars and stuff. It's the only place where you can see fake tits and an oxygen mask on the same person. I think.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Why is it so wild? Is it just?
I think it's because it's an in-between state. Like it's not it's not the old South. It's not got like the charm or the history of the old South. Some less good history of the old South, but it's got like new money in it as well.
Yeah, and then it had crazy amount of money from the cocaine.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then a lot of East Coast money moves down there. So a lot of people, when they hit a certain age, living in Boston, New York, New Jersey, whatever, they'll just move down and then bring all that money down with them.
Is it Puerto Rico Day? Is that what they have in Florida?
The Puerto Rico Day Parade. There's a big one in New York.
Big one. I think it's big. I think there's a big one in Florida as well.
Right, probably maybe Miami.
Miami, yeah.
Yeah, and huge Cuban national celebrations as
Cuban as well, and they had that. You seen that in Cocaine Cowboys. There was a time where there was more money lodged in the banks in Florida than all the rest of America put together, which is just insane, isn't it?
Why can't we go back to that America? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, well, it's hard to know where America. We talked about it a lot last week. The war will probably be good for America in healing their divide a little bit.
Yeah, you got a common enemy to focus on.
Got a common enemy to focus on. But yeah, look, it'd be interesting to see how the whole thing plays out.
Yeah. So there's 5 things we learned in this podcast. We're going to have a workers' rebellion. Everyone's going to be lazy. We're ending fossil fuels. And crossbows, excellent robbery.
Weapon of choice for an armed robbery.
Perfect. That's been Tom and Jack having the crack. Hope you enjoyed it. Cheers.
Thank you. Is that 2 hours?
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Perfect. Nice. Lovely.
Oh, good.
Cheers, buddy.